Alright, we've been away for a few months because of COVID, living across the border from each other, and of course Steve-O doing community service for that indecent exposure has kept us away for a while. So we're back.
He's that cheeky side, isn't he?
And today we're removing the front end to do the bloody forks. And we're going to do the steering head bearing too, because apparently that's a bit wonky. And we've just taken the screen off, taken the headlights semi off, and Steve's just removing the brakes. Any comments to make at this point of the exercise?
No, just make sure you got everything ready to put everything in. Like I use little takeaway trays. They work extremely well and they're really cheap. So just to keep things separated.
There you go. There's a handy little tip.
And front brakes. Obviously, can't take the wheel off with the front brakes installed because of the double disc arrangement. Otherwise, when you find you take the axle out, the wheel drops down, then you think, oh, I should have taken a brake off first. So that's what I'm doing, removing the brake. Remembering, of course, not to leave them swinging on the hose.
Yes.
Not a good thing. Well, not for a long time, anyway. Now, as I take the brake off, I give it a little squeeze, a little twist, which opens your brake pads just enough so that when you come time to put them back on again, it's a lot easier.
Yep.
Alright, and then I just grab bungee cord, hook it up and stick it somewhere out of the way for the time being. These will get released later on. You don't need to pop them out of there, even though you can, there's no need to. So I just leave them there so they don't get lost. You can take the other side off if you wish, or you can wait till later. Just be aware, of course, when you do take the front end apart, on bikes with ABS, the ABS sensor is wired into everything. So be sure you've got to take the ABS sensor out.
Okay.
So that it's released, because you're going to take the forks apart. You don't want to have that coming off with the forks.
Yeah. Didn't even consider that, considering Tracy's bike doesn't have ABS, so it's not a problem with that.
So I'll just get the brakes out of the way. You'll notice with the bike up on the stand, I have a backup stand under the back wheel. Just gives it the rigidity, and it's also strapped down to the jack, so it's not going anywhere. And for those who aren't aware, you can jack the bike on the pipes.
You can?
You certainly can, as you can see. I've never had a problem with it. I've done it to several bikes now. And this was from a Triumph dealer that told me that, so
Well,
I assume.
it must be gospel then.
Yes. Don't forget when you're doing the front axle to release the pinch bolts.
Yep.
And be generous with it. Matter of fact, they can come right out. You leave those when you change it out. Change out the fork oil later on, and the fork seal is more the point.
Yep. So release the pinch bolts.
Bolts. And when it comes to releasing the front fork, the front axle, don't be scared to use a bit of leverage.
Okay. Want me to hold anything? Is the actual simple division?
Ah, there we go. No, because I always turn up towards the load. not downwards. When it's like this. If it was on the ground, of course, you turn it that way, push that. I find it's just as easy to get on there and just brace yourself, use your legs, and it comes undone. There's a big lever, helps a lot too.
Probably try to get less of your arse and more of the wheel.
You can find these axle tools easily on eBay. There's plenty of places to sell them. So you go and buy a gigantic big head socket, which you don't really need. Right, that's it for that. Now comes the fun part. I like to use a pair of gloves for this job. And it is easier with one person to do this.
Excellent.
Because you have to jiggle, and it's a jiggle and feel and all that other stuff. So it's just
Oh, okay. Yep.
take the loads. That should be released. Well, if it's not released, just keep going. Should be though. Feels like this. Yep. There it goes. Just being a cheeky little side. Now, there's a spacer on either side which provides the clamp up force. The clamp up force being this gets pushed by this through the spacers onto this, and that's what keeps your front wheel tight in the forks. So every part of it is important. So you just support, take that out. The ABS bracket will drop off.
Yeah,
Of course.
as predicted, we didn't record that bit. And we know exactly how it goes back on again too, so that shouldn't be a drama.
Right, so as you can see, space to that side,
Yep.
and there's the wheel bearing inside there. They're pre-lubed, lubed for lifetime, don't have to do anything, but what you do have to do is make sure that this spacer makes up to the seal and runs in grease. So remember to grease the spacer, grease the inside of the seal lip when you put it all back together. Same for that side. Alright? Because I have seen them, they will wear the spacer right down, even though it doesn't affect the clamp up issue, it affects the clearance in the oil seal or grease seal and lets water into your bearings.
Okay.
So, there we are, ABS bracket. I can go over with the rest of it.
Okay. Looks like I've got a memory card issue, so I'm going to have to go through it, see what's going on.
Obviously, when you're taking out the thing, you need a Torx socket's the easiest way. If you can't get them, use a Torx key, looks like an Allen key with Torx ends. Very slow though. But with these, once you break them, they come out reasonably easy. I don't have the weight of the whole damn thing on it. Don't forget, once you do take them out, it will fall on the ground if you're not careful. And no, I've never done that.
Of course you haven't.
No, not taking it apart. Put it back together is a different matter. The bracket for the brake hose attaches to both points, so that when you release, it, the whole lot comes apart.
Right, yep.
And comes out like so. Be careful. Inside the isolator mounts are little metal spacers which allow the bolt to tighten down onto the fork. Make sure you don't lose any of those. You can imagine trying to get those from anywhere.
Yep.
Right. And also, this was an item from the service bulletin of Triumph. These go into blind holes in the forks. They must have Loctite on them, What they found in the past was bad maintenance. These bolts would back out from inside the forks, hit the sidewall of the tyres, and very neatly park the tyres off through the sidewalls.
Very
so
nice.
make sure when you put them back up, torque them properly and put Loctite on them. Unless you want to throw away nice tyres and then die in a crash. So now we're free. You can see fork legs will turn on themselves. They're not anchored any way inside, they're just anchored that way. And once we, as you can see, we've released the ABS bracket, ABS wiring, and that just clips into a couple of clips in there. And that's that for the bottom end of the forks. From now on, it's a case of release the indicators, let them sit on the forks, give the forks a wipe down with WD-40 or something, release the indicator, and then back off the lower triple tree bolts and the upper triple tree bolts, because what we're doing now is progressing merely the steering head. I'll get to the forks later, different subject entirely. So we'll work at disassembly first and just put them aside.
Yeah, but we've got enough memory card, I don't know what's going on, it's flashing its head off.
Oh. If you could hold that so she's around that way. Thank you. Now I've given these a spray with a WD compound, so they should theoretically just slide out rather easily, just like that. One fork.
Alright, we're doing take two here. We've come back after doing the steering head bearings.
Yeah.
That video failed because we struck a lot of dramas because we couldn't get one of the bottom bearing off.
Yeah.
So we had to race around to our local motorcycle dealer on Christmas Eve trying to get him to do it for us. So it turned out not being a fun time, so we didn't continue on the video here. But today we're taking the forks off and doing a service on them. And Steve assures me I'll probably take him about 15 minutes.
You will take 3 or 4 hours. Yeah, these things can also be a bugger to get off because the way they've bolted the arm things together. But, like I said, quarter drive set with a wobble tip works really good on this one. That comes out, which loosens the bracketry, which doesn't fall off, but it does get out of the way. Alright, removing the caps is a fairly simple method. There's a little cutout here which does 2 things. It allows you to take the caps off. It also provides a drain port. Now normally they will sit obviously like that. The drain port is a bit of a joke, doesn't really work very well if at all, but it's there at least, you can take it off. Now taking these off, don't push it in at that angle, you've got to keep a very shallow angle. This is in a bad position. On the other model bikes they put it there where you can get a straight head out. This one not so much, so just put it as close as you can to it and as parallel to it and just lightly tap. And they pop off like so. You'll notice it's almost unavoidable that you can damage them, but it's okay, you don't really see it. You don't want to damage the leg by gouging it with the pin punch. That you can just dress out with a file or a stone later on. The leg itself, you best, when you put this back on, put it on with a bit of grease or anti-corrosive lubricant like Inox a lanolin based stuff, the grease as I said. That way it makes it easier to get it off in future. Also stops build up of corrosion, which I've seen quite savage on the top of the legs. And that's how they come off. And to get them on, you use a seal driver to just bang them back on again. You won't get there at the moment. Right, underneath that are two things. The dust cover for the bearing, for the fork really. It's a dust cover, and underneath that sits in here is the fork seal itself. So this helps to keep the strut clean and stop ingress of dirt, and the seal merely wipes all the oil back down as it goes up and down. And that's how you can tell which way up the seals go. They seal down but slip up.
Yeah. But
yeah.
Didn't someone put them on the wrong way?
I did remember someone did that and felt really stupid about it too. But it was all good in the end.
Yeah.
Okay. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. We'll do it the sort of easier way. The fun part comes in now. To get in there is the bolt that retains the lower leg to the upper leg. It holds the damper tube. It also holds all the oil in there. Now you can attack this two ways. You can disassemble the entire forks, drain the oil through the top cap, and then put it all back together so you've got somewhere to hold it, and then do it that way. Or you can just leave it here, set it all up in the method I'll show you, and then simply let the oil drain out. But it has to be held, and that's the holding is the tricky bit.
Ah, yes.
A lot of people say use an impact driver to try and spin it out. Never had the success with that one. That'll work. What I do is simply run a strap down there onto itself. If I can do it, no, I'll have to go over the top. It's been a while since I did this, so bear with me, folks. Alright, Mr. Steve, this is where your assistance comes in. Just through that way. Yeah, just hold it. Just a matter of finding enough torque reaction to hold the bugger. Alright?
Yep.
And there it goes. Now, you can relax now, mate. Nothing to it now. Now this is where it gets tricky, why you need to hold this thing compressed, is because yes, you might open it, but as soon as it's loose, the damper rod will want to turn. So you still got to hold that damper rod somehow while you take the bolt out. And that lovely black oil, which should be just like that, no worries. There's your 10-weight suspension oil.
I must use a different variety because
Yeah.
I'm a bit scared to see what it's going to look like on the inside.
Oh, it should look good, mate. It just, that's why you get the Caro. Because once you pull it all apart, you can then drain it. Matter of fact, you know, you don't even have to disassemble this top section if you don't want to. I like it because I can then clean the whole thing out. But you can actually pull this apart now, pull this lower leg off. Once you take the seal retainer out, be aware there's a seal retainer.
That's steel clip.
So we can let that drain. don't need to hold this anymore. Just be careful when it lets go, because it's going to let go with the thwang. Like that. The twang, that's a technical term we in the trade use. Now that is just simply sitting on the seal now. This is where we remove the dust seal. Go around, lift the fork seal out. These look like all ball seals too. Case of working the knife blade in there just to lift the seal up a little bit. And prise it up with a screwdriver. Work it around. As you can see, you can turn the leg 180 degrees. Just lift it up cautiously. And there we go. That's looking real good inside there. No rust. That's a very good sign. Unfortunately, these caps are brilliant at holding water into that area, and you can end up with a lot of rust in there. Yeah, nasty. Right.
Probably because of my great maintenance regime, that's why that's so
That's
cool.
probably it.
Yeah.
For sure. Which releases the outer leg from the inner leg, because otherwise you'd be right up here. See like that one is? This takes it right down, so there's now just the top of the leg that retains it. It's the see, and that's how you get them apart. There's the seal. There's the seal backup. There's your upper bearing, stanchion bearing, and lower stanchion bearing. This one obviously fits in the leg. This one goes, fits in the lower leg. That goes on the upper leg, and that's what provides the bearing surfaces between the leg and the strut. And this here, this little thing, is the damper rod. And that's what bolts this to that, so that goes up and down. Now, that's loaded now, as you can see, I can't push that because that's loaded against the compression spring in there. And the compression spring is loaded by the cap at the top. So now we've got it that far. Get that down out of the way. And I'll do these one at a time because it's just easier. I'll drop the fork leg out now, but it's easy to see everything happening in there. That seal looks in pretty good condition. It actually does look like an all balls one. As you can see, it wipes that way, but slides easy that way. That's how you can always tell. Right.
Still recording.
Yep. Now it's a case of undoing back that one off, which releases the clamp pressure. And then,
You're probably not in the shop there.
that's alright, you get the running commentary out, so it's not necessary to torque it to 2,000 foot-pounds, just nip it up. But when removing fork caps, remember the spring inside is under compression. So as it comes out, remember to keep your weight on it so it doesn't go to spring, as you can see, or maybe not. But anyway, there is a load on the fork cap, so push down on the ratchet and socket as you undo it. That way it doesn't tear the last few threads of the fork cap out. Generally a bad thing. Okay, now that we've done that, we can leave it assembled if you wish, or you can pull it all apart if you wish. There's the spacer, factory spacer. remember to remove, or at least loosen, the indicator. That will just let that slide up and down, no biggie. Then, once we've done that, release lower leg clamp, lower clamp, right, evenly. Remember to support the leg because there's nothing holding in there but Mr. Friction. Now it's just a case of, if it's not going to fall out, it's not going to fall out. Remember to support that somehow. Try not to let it hang. Probably best in a hockey strap. I like hockey straps. Put that down on the floor out of the way.
I think I said hockey straps for most of my life.
Yeah. There we go. I should just rest there. Yeah, lovely. Right, and there we have it. One side done. Don't forget there's a washer in there. And also a big FO spring. There's your suspension spring, which makes a hell of a mess on the floor. And then this bit slides out. And that's the damper rod. That's the all-important bit that really can make or break your suspension. Because that's what provides the damping. Strangely enough, that's why it's called the damper rod.
Yeah.
And what it does...
Nothing to do with cooking.
Nope. Except on the road, you might be cooking with it, mate. But as you can see, there's a spring. That's your top-out spring. That spring prevents, in this situation, if you got the front wheel off the ground, prevents the suspension slamming open and smashing bits, because that rests against the outer leg. So when your suspension comes down, it hits that spring. So that, under normal circumstances, you hope that spring never gets used, but it's there anyway. And that just generally rides up and down as the suspension moves. Because remember, this is bolted to the outer leg through the inner leg.
Yep.
And these little holes are the most important part. Don't muck with these holes unless you have a very good reason to do so. That's what ports the fluid between the inner and the outer leg. As the leg goes up and down, the lower leg goes up and down, it ports the oil from one side to the other. That provides the damping flow. Right? That's what stops your springs turning into a pogo stick, because there's a lot of spring there. Alright? Now, if you may have heard of gold valve emulators. Gold valve emulators are a device that mimics a shock absorber type, a closed strut shock absorber. Okay? They sit on top of here and they can graduate, what's the word? You can adjust the flow of your damping rate. As you can see, this is fixed. They work this out at the Triumph engineering shop to the best average place to allow the flow to dampen. So at low speed, you get a fairly fast movement, so you have less damping at low speed. But at high speed, the flow can't go fast enough through these holes, so the suspension stiffens up. So it either slams at high speed or becomes a bit spongy at low speed. So it's averaged. What the gold valve emulators do is you drill these out, you actually drill a few holes in that, so it has no flow restrictions, and the valve emulator, which sits on top of here, then ports fluid between the two, and you can adjust that flow rate, so it gives you an adjustable suspension for about $300.
Okay.
To me, it's a cruiser, not a race bike. This works just fine for me.
Yep.
But that's the important one. And as you can see at the end of it, there's nothing, there's no taper, there's no flats, no nothing to hold this while you put the bolt back in. So yeah, you might be able to start the bolt, but as soon as it starts to get tight, there's nothing to stop this just turning inside the strut, and you never get it done up. Which is why you have to compress it, compress the spring against this, holds the whole lot together. And there is how suspension works. That garter spring is part of the cover, so don't worry about that. I just took that off for release. So we take the retainer off, the seal retainer, the dust cap, like that, and the seal. Ta-da! And there we have it. You will reuse this bit, the rest of them not so much. Unless you want to keep them as a spare set, because these are in pretty good condition. In fact, very good condition. Alright, so then you've got the backup washer, I guess you call it, which sits on top of the upper, or the lower legs bearing, and that's the upper legs bearing there. Alright, so that goes in there, and the whole lot then gets a good wash down, into a Kero, and then reassembled. Oh. You can see that little bit of corrosion where it sits against the housing of the lower leg. That's the bearing surface. So just give it a quick clean up, take the big chunks off. And then, as I said, when you put it back in, put it in with a bit of grease or a bit of corrosion preventative. And that way you won't get this problem happening again. Of course, with corrosion, the nasty thing about corrosion is it grows, you can end up splitting the legs from corrosion. This is from my bike, and this was the dust cap. That's the standard Triumph dust cap, and you can see what happened when water sits in there, and it just swells up the whole seal. It just grows, and that then damages that seal, which is now rubbing against the leg. It sits that way, up and down, with a rough edge like that, and that way you rip the chrome off your leg.
Yep. And
gets very expensive. The seal itself wasn't too bad. There's a little bit of rust on the garter spring inside there, but obviously that seal, the dust seal, was not keeping much out, and that's a result of those silly chrome caps.
Okay.
Some people have actually taken those caps off and replaced them with rubber concertina boots.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Now you can see it should have, this is the slippery coating, if you like, on the staunchion seal. This one's what you'd call the stationary side of it, and this is sliding up and down inside the lower leg, or the lower leg sliding up and down on top of it, and you can see what happens with wear patterns. It's actually worn that cover off. Now, of course, wearing off just means it's rubbing on the actual bearing material rather than the slippery coating. It really should be replaced, but I'll leave that in the capable hands of the owner as to how he wants to go in that direction.
Well,
Better go and clean it up.
haven't got that bit floating about, have we? So.
No. I mean, it doesn't make too much difference. As long as you keep your oil changed frequently, well, not frequently, but every 2 years, change the oil.
Your fork oil?
Fork oil.
Really?
Yeah. Oh shit, yeah. Every 2 years, change your fork oil. Yeah, it's not a lifelong thing, mate. Sorry.
So would that have been changed? It should have been changed during the services, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
Did it look like it'd been changed?
The major, yeah. The major service changes it.
Yeah.
There's stuff inside this leg that you don't need to take out. It's all to do with bushings and so forth in there. My advice is don't frig with it if you don't need to. If you can feel things inside there, it's just where the spring and the damper rod rest. The damper rod goes up inside that, comes out through there, and that's how that works.
Okay. And basically everything else just gets a bit of clean up with a bit of Kero and an inspection.
Right, for reassembly, damper rod goes in there. Don't forget the top out spring. Don't forget the top out spring in your damper rod. That goes inside the upper leg. Ta-da! Then put the cap on. Alright, now this is the fun part. Holding it level, if you can, simply slide that all together until you get right down the bottom. Keep it upright and put the big retainer bolt back in. But there's a method for doing that. The axle holds this bolt in, but the axle doesn't go all the way up against the head of this to retain it completely. Therefore, put a Loctite on it, because remember it's sitting that way up. A little bit of Loctite on it. Doesn't need a lot. And then, Loctite automatic aviation gasket sealing. Messy crap, but works well. Rather than the big sticky one, I just put a brush coat around the base of it so that it seals up against that shoulder. Don't need much, just enough to be a decent coverage. Then 3/8 extension, and that back in there. Then you can turn it that way up and pick up the end of the damper tube. Should pick it up. So it started, it ain't falling out, but now the damper tube's spinning inside.
Yep. That's your broomstick of old, is it?
Yes. Well, that's what I use to undo it.
Okay.
I mean, what I can do makes life a bit easier. Put the broomstick down there, just enough to hold that. It's just a broomstick with a bit of tape on it. That way I can get that hand tight, and we'll talk that up later. Whatever you do not push it in hard, because you have to get it back out again. It's just enough to hold it. So now we drop that on there. And that's our upper bearing. Get our seal driver. See, adjustable seal drivers. Fits in the slots, and then that just gets banged down on top of it. So this is how you seat the bearing. That fits just inside there. That you can let it slip over the top. There we go. And that's put the bearing in. Well, started it anyway. This is where you really need a clamp, which has worked really, really well for this job. Then we put the washer. This will help you knock down the bearing into its place a bit easier. Oh, a bit more space. Doesn't take much to hammer it into place. Don't bang the crap out of it, just tap it into place. And now it's a case of we fit the seals. You'll note on the Triumph ones, it's plain around the top, and inside there is a garter seal, which is that springy thing in there. The all balls have a garter seal top and bottom, so it really provides good support for your seals.
Okay.
And also, of course, the dust cap the dust cap itself, which is the other ones here, have a garter seal on the top but none on the bottom, or the other way around. No, the garter spring on the top, not the bottom. That's how you tell the difference. And these ones go so that they wipe that way downwards and release coming up. Some people say use a bullet, which is just something that fits over the end, it stretches the seal slightly. I find with the old masking tape, this will protect. This just protects the seal as you go to slide it on. Now, grab a bit of rubber grease. Some rubber grease, which is all kind of shit. Just put some rubber grease on. That's a bit separated, but nonetheless it's alright. Okay. Rubber grease on the inside. I mean, you can use oil if you want, just fork oil. I mean, that's what lubricates it all the time anyway. And then you just work it on. And as you can see with the grease, but if you go that way it's much easier. Then a little bit of rubber grease around the outside of your seal, and that will help stop corrosion sitting in where the seal sits, in the seal bed there. So you slide it down, keep lubricating it. That's a good solid fit. Just sit it in the lip like that, and with the seal driver, once again, that on the top there, slide that over there, make sure it's in, and then just pat the seal down evenly until it gets below the little indent. Where the snap ring fits, which it isn't just yet. No, it's not sitting in that groove. It's on the inside of your dust seal. Now, as you can see with the lip there, dust seal can't go the wrong way up. You can't screw this one up, so don't try.
Yeah, just make sure that you've got the circlip in there. Took a bit of work, but
yeah, make sure your make sure your seal's all the way in. They are tight when they're new like this, but make sure it goes below the circlip groove, and that the circlip is in the groove.
you'll hear it click when you get it in there.
Alright, then it's just a case of slide the dust cap down, get him started. You can actually push this in with your fingers a long way and then finish it off with the seal driver. Just make sure it's seated all the way around. Doesn't take much to tap that sucker in, because all you got to do is get it in and make sure it's flush on that edge there where it goes around, which it is. And there we have it. Assembled. Alright, so we've done that so far. Now, when you put it all back together, put it back in the clamps, and don't forget to put that on. But before you do it, make sure, and this is what I do, hit it with a touch of the lanolin on both inside the cap and on there, because the inside of the cap will go rusty as well. Now,
This isn't anything, is it?
No, that's for the top of the spring.
Okay.
It is something, yes, but no.
That's what I'll check.
Yeah, good idea. Just give that a wipe around and put a light wipe on here. To stop the corrosion starting underneath where the cap sits. Don't need to put the cap on right now, but it won't hurt to do that. And once again, that seal driver is the best way to do this. And you just drive it down. There we go. And that's what your front suspension would feel like without some sort of damping. And that washer from previously, please go. Thank you very much. That sits on top of the spring. The spacer. Of course, looks like it's got a compressor lock, but in fact, that's how it works.
Ah.
So we can put that in later. It's just handy to put the spring in first. That way you know it's all back together. Alright.
Nothing better than looking back and saying it's sitting on the bench.
That's it. Slide her up. You bastard. One of these days I'm going to make up a spacer that doesn't need to do this.
Okay, just to recap the last bit, put the top cap back in so we could tighten the load back onto the bottom of the fork so we can do the bolt up at the bottom.
That's it. And now look up the torque figure for said bolt.
This is before any oil's gone in, obviously.
Now we'll need you to, obviously, to hold that for the torque reaction if you could, Steve. Alright?
Yep.
Nope, not tight enough. Okay.
Yeah, you can feel it moving inside.
Spinning inside. Just not quite there. So I'm going to release it again. Magic device for checking the appropriate amount. You can measure it in, or you can use this machine. It's just simply a sliding collar, and you measure how far from the top of the oil, which sits here, to the top of the strut, which is in the book, and then you just keep topping it up, and if it's too full, you just suck it down. Simple.
Jesus. Any fancy?
It is. I've got almost all the tools. Of course, you gotta pump it through to make sure that it just bleeds the air out of it. Now you'll note, here's something to note, with shocks, they're an air and oil suspension system.
Okay.
Which is why you have a gap of air above the oil, because in compression, as you can hear, as you go down, you build up air pressure inside, so that gives you a bit more spring bounce, if you like. Rather than just relying on the harshness of the spring, you've also got a bit of an air bounce in there as more shock absorbing. The O-ring on top of or on the cap is an important device. You've got to make sure that O-ring's in good condition to seal the strut. with the air in it. Yep, you can hear that's running nicely now. Alright, just remember always to keep pumping it, make sure you blend all the air out of the bottom of the leg. Put my little measuring device in there, which is already set up. You can go over there if you want. Right, let's apply a little bit of suction, and there we have the oil at the right level. A pretty good guess, I would say, wouldn't you?
Ah, you get a few mil out.
Okay, replace the spring. Make sure it's clean.
Does it matter which way it goes?
No. And the washer.
I'd say we're going to put the cap back on so we don't accidentally spill it while we're putting it in.
You're dead right there. It only needs to be just
You want a rag?
oh, ah, thank you. Alright, okay.
We're running out of battery, mate, so I
No,
think
that's pretty much it. You've already seen, well, we've got to retorque the head bearing, but that's not that big a deal. It's a bigger job, but matter of fact, it's quite a big job. But we'll get to that later. As for now, that's pretty much it of a fork reassembled.